Here's an idea that made me uncomfortable. Dying with a large amount of money might actually mean that you planned your life poorly. And the reason it made me feel uncomfortable is because that's what I'm actually trying to do right now, is to build wealth and pass it along. I've always been someone who delays gratification, who saves, who invests, who pushes things out into the future. And that's how most investors are wired. We spend decades building and compounding and optimizing, but we don't spend a lot of time asking a very simple question. What did we actually build all of this for? Welcome to The Sage Investor. I'm Brian Spear, and my mission is to help you generate cash flow and build legacy wealth in a tax-efficient manner, because that's what I'm trying to do for my family, and I'm sharing all the secrets that I learn along the way. This is one of those ideas that stops you in your tracks, because it forces you to think about something that most of us avoid. Not how to build wealth, but when and how you actually use it. When do you actually spend it? If you really step back and you look at your life, what are you building all of this for? Not the surface level answer, but the real one. Because most of us follow a very similar path. Work hard, save aggressively, invest consistently, delay gratification. And the assumption is that we'll enjoy it. We'll enjoy it later. But later is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that plan. And I don't think we spend enough time pressure testing what that actually means. Because the truth is, time is not linear in the way that we think it is. And not all of your years are created equal. And that's what this episode is about. And it's why we wanted to bring this book to the forefront today. It's Die with Zero. It was highly recommended by a lot of folks in an entrepreneurial investing group that I'm a part of. And so I went about popping open the cover, and ultimately very, very happy that I did, because this book had a couple of golden nuggets. And of course, it will not tell you how to spend your money, but it was illuminating to me because it provided a little bit of a framework and some intrigue on different ideas and topics that I wouldn't have otherwise thought about, of kind of when you might be more well-served to send that cash out of your wallet in an effort to optimize your life, in an effort to live the most rich, fulfilling life that you possibly can. From my perspective, I'm the kind of guy that oftentimes is going to delay gratification and try to continue to build as much wealth and compound interest as I can over time. I'm just wired in that manner to delay gratification. But this is a great book that provides you with some insight on why it would be prudent to do it now as opposed to wait. I think as investors, we spend so much time, energy, and effort ultimately working on compiling a large net worth, building cash flow, right? What do I always talk about? Generating cash flow and building legacy wealth in a tax-efficient manner. That's what the focus is. That's where the vast majority of my personal time, energy, effort, and attention go. But I think as an investor, oftentimes one thing that is missed, that is overlooked, and that is lacking is once you build this cash flow, once you build this wealth, what do you do with it? How do you spend it? And nobody really tells you how to go about doing that well. The reason that this is a topic and a conversation that we want to bring to the table is that I literally had this conversation with somebody 2 weeks ago, and they had a different point than I did, a different perspective on this book than I did. And both of us are trying to optimize, trying to grow our wealth, trying to build. This individual tracks his net worth every single month and has done so for decades and dislikes the idea and the concept of the book, right? And I don't. I actually admire, enjoy, and appreciate the book. And so I think that mere fact that two individuals that have the exact same objectives for them and their families have completely different perspectives on this book make you, as an investor, want to understand more about why we feel the way that we do about that striking perspective of dying with zero. I was at a restaurant with one of our partners, friend, long-standing investor, has been with us for over 10 years now, and had the luxury of sitting down, talking shop, and spending some time together with him and his wife. And this book was brought up. And he said, "Have you ever read Die with Zero?" I said, "Yes." He said, "What'd you think about it?" And prior to my sharing my perspective, I wanted to hear what he had to say about it. And so I asked him a great question. Like, I'm happy to share my opinion, but what do you feel? How do you feel about it? And he said, I don't like the book. I don't know if he said I hate the book, but he said, I dislike the book. I disagree with the idea in its entirety. And it was interesting to me to hear that perspective, because the book from my side of the house was I don't want to use the terminology profound. that's exaggeration. But there are most assuredly some serious golden nuggets inside of that binder, in my humble opinion. I've never once paid $10 for a book and not gotten a good return on my investment. And this was such an example, right? This partner and I, we share so much overlap in what we're trying to achieve on behalf of our families. Every single month for the last multiple decades, he has tracked his personal net worth. Absolutely beautiful. Love every bit of it. Trying to change the family tree in one generation. I'm trying to do the same. It's beautiful. We share an investment philosophy, trying to generate cash flow and build legacy wealth in a tax-efficient manner. So I asked why. Why do you feel that way? Because, of course, he wants to pass along so much more to the next generation. And he wants to be able to share with his children the idea of hard work and dedication and delayed gratification and all the things that we as investors so much appreciate and cherish and hold so high. Die with Zero is a very shocking title, as you can imagine, especially for somebody who has all the intention of changing the family tree in one generation and leaving a large amount of wealth to the next generation, and hopefully in due time passing it along to the third generation and the fourth generation, etc. Of course, I share his philosophy, but I took a different perspective, and I genuinely appreciated the author's intent and took it with a grain of salt. What is the risk of my going and optimizing for the highest amount of wealth and the highest amount of cash flow that I can ultimately create, right? If I only solely drive and focus on doing that, what is the risk associated with that? The risk is I end up like so many of these other individuals that unfortunately have really brutal family situations. There have been many biographies written about some of the world's best founders who've created and amassed exorbitant amounts of wealth over time, built great businesses, but their personal lives are an absolute dumpster fire. That is a risk that I'm unwilling to take with my bride and with my family. I'm unwilling to do that. So that risk is far and away too much for me to ultimately do. And I would happily give away a little bit of that return in terms of the nominal dollar amount that I'm going to create over time to ensure that we're optimizing for lifestyle along the way. Personally, this is how I feel. The title Die with Zero, while it can be shocking, really should be taken with a grain of salt. The goal is not literally to die with zero money. The goal is to die with zero regret, while your capital worked at maximum efficiency throughout your entire life. The author makes this argument that you're more well served to spend money at different times in your life to optimize for rich experiences. And he gives a couple of different examples. The first one I would use is, when you're in your 20s, he was in his 20s, maybe 25 years old, working on Wall Street as an investment banker, and he had a buddy that was doing the same, and his buddy just hauled off and quit, spent 2 months backpacking, staying in hostels in Europe. And the author was unbelievably shocked. Why would you ever do that, right? That's absolutely insane to walk away from an unbelievable job at such an early age that could change the trajectory of your financial future. So the author said, you know what, I'm gonna make sure that I get my ducks in a row, build my life, make sure that I got a good financial foundation, and then I'll go do that. Then I'll take a couple of months and I'll travel throughout Europe, etc. Fast forward 10 years, and he's now got a wife, got kids, and while he does have more money in the bank account, there is literally no chance that he would ever be able to go spend multiple months traveling around Europe, backpacking. And even if he wanted to, he wouldn't be willing to stay in hostels along the way, right? He's just at a juncture of his life where that's not something he'd be interested in doing. The point is that those experiences that you have earlier in life, you give up a little bit in terms of compound interest, in terms of the investments that you're making along the way. But the argument he is making is that there is also something to be said of the compounding effect of the memories that you have. So as you can imagine, every time that you have one of these beautiful experiences, like myself, my wife, we had an unbelievable honeymoon. We spent 2 weeks traveling around the Baltic and multiple different countries on the cruises. It was just an amazing experience. And I still have the luxury every single year of spending time reflecting back with my wife of this amazing journey that we've had. And every time that we bring it up, there's a little bit of an endorphin hit. We get to remember these unbelievable experiences. And there's something to be said for that. There's value in that. In fact, some people would state that those experiences are priceless. And so, yes, it costs money to go do those things a little bit further upstream earlier in your life. But when viewed over a long enough horizon, not only do you get the unbelievable one-time experience, but rather you get to experience it over and over and over in the memories that you can revert back to. And those provide you with an endorphin hit and oftentimes can be priceless along the way. Later in life, right, you often, hear folks, unfortunately, truly, that are on their deathbed that have now come to the realization that time is way more important and way more valuable than money. That has always been the case, but when you're much younger, you don't realize it until much later in life. And now all of a sudden you built a little bit of wealth over time, you've become somewhat successful in the eyes of society, but you realize, so what, right? The truth is, if you don't have your health, then what is wealth? It's completely irrelevant. It's why too many times when people are on their deathbed, you never hear folks saying, I wish I would have, spent a little bit more time at the office. I wish I would have made a little bit more money. I wish I would have had another zero on the income statement or another zero on the balance sheet. Rather, they always say, I wish I would have spent more time with family. I wish I wouldn't have worked so hard. Those are often the regrets that you hear. Most people die with too much money or not enough life. Almost nobody gets that balance right. I think another way to try to exemplify this is from one of my favorite movies of all time, probably my favorite movie of all time, Good Will Hunting, where the main character, his love interest, is studying at Harvard, and she happens to be, in her 20s, and both of her parents unfortunately had passed away, and she inherited a lot of money. She inherited multiple millions of dollars. So when that was the case, they're squabbling back and forth and having a little bit of an argument, and Will, the main character, is kind of viewing her as somewhat of a trust fund baby. And the love interest says something to the effect of, every day I wake up, you don't think that every single day when I wake up, I could give all of this money back. I could give it all back, and I'd give it back in a second if it meant I could have one more day with my parents. But I can't. And that's my reality. And so I live with it. For those that are kind of clutching onto the purse strings and so excited to pass along wealth to the next generation when you reach 65, 70, 75, 80, et cetera, and you're trying to pass along that wealth, that's beautiful. But I can promise you that the vast majority of the children would much, 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 much prefer to take the trip with you now so that you could travel the world together, spend time together, have those rich experiences together, be able to reflect back on them, and they'll remember those for the rest of their lives. It is far more important than passing along another $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, in my humble opinion. The book Die With Zero has really helped me reframe what the ultimate objective is. Of course, I want to generate cash flow and build legacy wealth in a tax-efficient manner, pass along a bunch of wealth to the next generation, change the family tree. That is all true. But I want to ensure that we're not so stingy and stringent about our expenses that we're not enjoying life along the way and having the most wonderful life that we possibly can. So this idea of having these unbelievable experiences that produce dividends downstream, right? I mentioned my honeymoon, and every single year when we think about it, we just get these endorphin hits, and it's just so beautiful to think about that experience again. And you just benefit from the compound effect associated with going back to the well and enjoying these priceless memories over time. That is really the objective. It is not to die with zero, but it's to optimize for lifestyle. And that's what we're trying to do. Ensure that you're not just trying to grow for growth's sake. You're growing with intention, but ensuring that you're soaking up every single minute, every single moment that you can with your family along the way, because you'll never get those moments back. And it's applying the same idea and this concept of risk-adjusted returns. You only need to get rich once. And once you do that, you should try to focus first on protecting the downside, right? You do not need to go shoot for the moon anymore. The first priority should ultimately be ensuring that you never lose money. Rule number one, don't lose money. Rule number two, don't forget rule number one. Continue to follow that path. So I'm trying to generate the best return that I possibly can while taking the most de minimis amount of risk possible along the way. And so if I'm bringing that same idea and the concept of risk-adjusted returns to life in general, if I kept a little bit more of that principle along the way and didn't spend that money, I could have maybe built a little bit more wealth. So what, right? How much more do you actually need? Money doesn't actually buy happiness. Independence does. And then once you have independence, then you're just trying to find the best, most rich experiences that you can. What about the inverse, right? What about the risk-adjusted return if I spent too much money, right? What if I spent a little bit too much money? Then from the perspective of compound interest, maybe I don't have as much principal to grow it, and maybe I don't go from 7 figures to 8 figures, or maybe I don't go from 8 figures to 9 figures, or maybe I don't go from 9 figures to $1 billion over time, right? But at some point, there's always somebody that there's always a bigger fish to fry. You're then kind of in this comparative analysis situation. And if you focus on that, the risk adjusted return perspective, the risk of spending a little bit too much is maybe I don't get to 1 billion. Okay. Is that the end of the world? If you don't get to 9 figures or 8 figures of net worth, depending upon where you're at in that range, is that the end of the world when you know that you spent time with your family? Are you going to regret spending more time taking that extra weekend with your family along the way? I would pose to you that the likelihood is not. Right. So just trying to make sure that you keep that in mind as you progress, and you optimize for lifestyle experiences along the way, as opposed to simply and surely only solely focusing on building your net worth and your income streams along the way. I feel like a lot of folks that are extremely competitive, whether they're investors or just in business in general, you can fall into a trap, right? You can fall into a trap where you're always trying to build a bigger business, build a bigger net worth over time, and you're competing against all these other individuals. Yes, it's important to have a really good return on investment. It's obviously an important trait to have a high quality return on equity, but it is even more important to have the best return on life that you can along the way. What are we actually optimizing for? Because if you do not do that, you end up in a situation where you're comparing yourself to the Joneses. If you're always trying to keep up with the Joneses, there's always going to be a bigger boat. There's always going to be a bigger car. There's always going to be a bigger spaceship. Everybody else, right? There's always somebody out there that's got a bigger house, a bigger boat, a bigger car. It's completely irrelevant. And it ties back to this idea of the inner scorecard. Do you have an outer scorecard or an inner scorecard? Back to the old sage wisdom from Warren Buffett. Try to live your life with an inner scorecard where at the end of the day, when you can lay your head down at night knowing that you've done everything in your power to optimize your family's situation, and optimize your life for the betterment of your spouse, your kids, your grandkids, and all the network immediately around you. And if you do that, then that's all that really matters. If you're trying to compare yourself to others and benchmark yourself to others along the way, that ends up leading to just this innate anxiety and unhappiness because you will never make it. There's always somebody out there with a bigger car, a bigger house, a bigger this, a bigger that. It's completely irrelevant. Focus on yourself, right? If you had the choice to either be known as the best investor in the world, but you actually had a horrific track record and you were the worst, would you prefer that? Or would you rather be recognized as the worst investment track record in the world, but in actuality, you have the best? You should strive on a daily basis to have an inner scorecard and work such that you're less focused on your reputation and you're more focused on your character. Because reputation is what others think you are, and your character is what you actually are. Focus on your character. Focus on your character. Focus on your inner scorecard, and the results ultimately take care of themselves over the long term. So how do you kind of implement that in a more systematic manner in your life? The best way that I've found to ultimately implement this is by leveraging a system that was shared with me by a gentleman named Jesse Itzler. Jesse Itzler went on to, as a very unique and eclectic background, multiple time entrepreneur, sold multiple businesses, one of which is NetJets, the largest private jet company in the world, ultimately sold it to Warren Buffett. His wife, Sarah, I believe Sarah Blakely, also an exceptional entrepreneur in her own right. So these individuals have done exceptionally well. Congratulations. And now he basically goes and teaches a framework on how to live the most rich life possible. Because it's no longer about money. It's about how do you get the best experiences in life. He's got a very great framework that I've implemented in my life as well. And it's basically a cheeky name, but it's called the Big Ass Calendar. The Big Ass Calendar. Literally on my wall behind me is just that. It's a 365-day calendar posted on one respective board that in a moment's notice throughout the entire course of the year, you can just see your entire year planned out in one fell swoop. It's very, very helpful. And you try to plan all of the family's items on that calendar in advance of any of the additional business stuff, because if you don't put the family stuff at first, I can promise you that my calendar would be absolutely swamped with exorbitant amounts of additional responsibilities from the business that would overrun any of that open calendar space, right? So you have to put the family stuff on first, and then you build the business to serve the family. And so the idea of the principle is the following, of the Big Ass Calendar is the following. He's got a couple of very simple ones that I follow that I think are very helpful. The first one is the idea of a masogi, of having one large life goal that you want to achieve over the course of the year. So that can mean anything. It could be, running a marathon if you've never done it. It could mean becoming a published author. It could mean some sort of large goal that's going to take you multiple months to ultimately achieve over time. So have something like that so that over the course of your life, you'd be able to say, hey, in 2025, I ran my first marathon. Hey, in 2026, I ended up, running my first triathlon or whatever the case may be, right? Then he has this other rule that I absolutely love. It's called Kevin's rule. One time he was having a conversation with a buddy of his named Kevin, obviously, that was a firefighter, just a very, traditional blue collar role. And they went out on this fun little trip out in Washington, where I believe they hiked up to the top of a mountain, Mount Rainier, and they were up on top of this mountain in the middle of nowhere, nobody around. And again, didn't cost them any money to do this. This was on a random Friday night. And they were just out there hiking in the middle of nowhere, thoroughly enjoyed every moment of it. And he asked Kevin, how often do you do this? He said, great story. I got a good system for this. He said, every other week, I do something, a little mini adventure that I would typically not do. So over the course of the entire year, I have 26 little mini adventures that I would never be able to do over time. By instituting that small little tweak in your life, and again, that didn't take any money to go out and do a little bit of a hike or walk around and do something random with your family. These are little mini adventures outside of the day-to-day, outside of the norm. And if you amplify that over the course of a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, a decade, 2 decades, 5 decades, over time, as you can imagine, you have, let's say you live another 50 years with the advent of beautiful medicine and the like, right? That would ensure that you have 50 year-defining masogis, year-defining moments, and you have hundreds of these little mini adventures. And what that ensures is that you've won life. You win life. And you'll be able to go back and refer back to those unbelievable mini adventures over time and get a little tiny endorphin hit every time that you do so. And the beautiful thing about the big-ass calendar is you plot that on the calendar and you'll have the luxury of going back and remembering all these things that you've achieved over the course of a year at a moment's notice. And that's what I've found to be unbelievably successful in ensuring that you build the business to serve the family and spend the money at the time that makes the most sense, so you're getting the best return on life that you possibly can along the way. I understand that our goal is to generate cash flow and build legacy wealth in a tax-efficient manner. This is an investing show. But the entire purpose of money, it is not money for money's sake. Money is a tool, very much like you go to Home Depot and somebody buys a drill. Why do you buy a drill? Do you care about the drill? Do you put a drill on a pedestal? No, you do not care about the drill, the quarter-inch drill. You care about the quarter-inch hole in the wall. The money is just a tool to ultimately have the cash flow so that it allows you to live the life that you want with your family. And that is what matters most. So always making sure that you keep that top of mind and number one on the priority list when you're building this wealth over time and allocating capital on behalf of your family. Maybe one of the most common times that this pops up is when couples are in their peak earning years. Because often when couples are in their peak earning years is when the children are in school, becoming young adolescents. And you've heard it over and over and over again, right? When you have young kids, you hear everybody always say it, right? Oh my gosh, enjoy the time. It goes so quickly. It goes so quickly. Another one of these staggering statistics is that by the time that your child is 18 years old, you have already spent 95% of the cumulative amount of time that you will ever spend with that child. You will never get that time back. And it's oftentimes very difficult to make the conscious choice to not work so hard, to not go spend the extra hour at work and overtime, because you're trying to amass the Rolodex and the bankroll and the nest egg necessary to be able to live the life that you want with your family. But the truth is, the family is oftentimes right under your nose the entire time. And you want to ensure that you spend it as wisely as you can. As the old sage always says, I wish I would have spent more time with my family along the way. So please just be mindful of that, of course, especially for those that have the kids there or the grandkids now. Try to spend as much time with them while they're young as you can, because by the time that they're 18 years old, that statistic is shocking. 95% of the time that you will ever spend with your children is done by the time that they leave the house when they're 18 years old. So let's go ahead and round this out. At the end of your life, you're not going to be staring at your account balance. You're going to be remembering your life, the time that you spent, the experiences that you had, the people that you were present for. And I think if you ask most people what matters most, they're not going to say money. They're going to say time. So maybe the goal isn't to die with zero, and maybe it's not to die with the most. Maybe it's just to allocate your life in a way that you don't look back with regret. So I'm going to leave you with this. Where in your life right now are you overfunding the future and underfunding the present? That's just something worth thinking about. All right, this episode has been all about zeros. And speaking about zeros, we want to make sure that you don't have one of those single zero events that massively and tremendously adversely affect your ability to compound capital over time. Warren Buffett has this phrase that any number, no matter how large, when multiplied by a single zero, ultimately becomes zero. So we're trying to avoid that. Too many different investors ultimately make the bet and focus on the wrong location when they're making that bet and trying to allocate capital into the marketplace. So in the next episode, we're going to be digging into why folks should be betting on the jockey, not on the horse. Because the human being making the decision in the investment is oftentimes far more important than the deal in and of itself. But until next time, you be great.